you're not on the same page with your spouse, then it's very hard to get in front of your kids and do all this. We believe as a family that if we stay connected to the vine, that we're about serving other people, we're about others, and we live generously, we're givers, that will lead to a godly heritage for 10 generations. You can't ever go wrong bringing family together and having communication, especially if you're inviting God into that.
Duane Donner, we're really glad that you could join us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Hey, Duane, just a little bit of a quick intro on you. You've been in business for a long time. You've been part of a family business, and you're also doing some investment banking as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'd like to dive in with you if that's okay,
Sure.
And talk about some of the journey that you've been on as a family. How's that?
Sounds great. I love my family. Actually, I love you. You've been part of helping us develop some of our family planning and legacy planning.
Well, it's been fun to work with you. And so just a little bit of context for you, because I think we need to set this before we dive in fully. Tell us a little bit about you and your wife and the kids. And of course, now you've got adult kids and grandkids. So give us a little bit of that context.
Yes. Well, real quick, Amy and I, my wife, we've been married now we're in our 36 year of marriage. We met in 8th grade. So we didn't get married in 8th grade, although we're from Louisiana. We probably could have, We got married right out of college. Actually, Amy was right out of college. I was in the Army, so we've been married for 35 years, been knowing Amy since I was 13, and we kind of grew up together. And then we got married, and we were married. I was actually in the Army at Fort Benning. When we got married, we went back over there, and then I think we were married, 2 or 3 months, and Amy told me, hey, guess what? We're having a baby. I'm like, wow, that was fast. And so we started early. We have adult kids. We have 3 daughters. Our oldest daughter is 35. She'll be 35 this year. She has 4 kids, three girls and a boy. My middle daughter is 33. She has 4 kids, two boys, 2 girls, and 1 on the way. So we have number 9 on the way. Very fertile family here. And by the way, they got married pretty early too. They were right out of college when they got married. And then my youngest daughter, Bella, just recently graduated from Auburn, and she's engaged to be married. She'll be married in December. So we're gonna. I don't know what you call it. It's empty nesters when they leave the house. I don't know what you call it when they all get married, but maybe that's called they're all off the payroll and they got somebody else to take care of them. I don't know.
You're expecting more grandkids then?
Yeah. I would imagine we're going to have some more, but we'll see.
Yeah, and Duane, the ages of the grandkids too, help us out with that.
The oldest is my granddaughter. She's 9, and my youngest grandchild is David, and he's, I think, 18 months. And again, Sage is pregnant. She'll have another. In fact, we know it's going to be a boy. His name's Rivers. He's Lord willing, will be born in October. So pretty much going to have him from 0 to 9 years old.
Duane, too, I know you worked really hard at this idea of family and trying to keep the family together. Why is that? Why have you worked so hard at this?
Well, first of all, I would like to say I've got a great family. We're very blessed. I've got great son-in-laws, one on the way. We're not there yet, but he's so far so good. I love family. I grew up in a very familial Cajun culture, but there was a lot of brokenness in my family. There was a lot of brokenness in my wife's family due to many things. And I got introduced early on to the idea of like family. Of course, back then it was called family office, which I do not. That's one of the mistakes I made, Bill. I would not call your family meetings with your adult kids a family office. I don't think that's a good idea. But that's what I learned. And, I got introduced to that back when I'm in my 20s, when my wife, I came from a very modest family, and my wife came from an entrepreneurial family. My father-in-law did very well, and he came into some wealth, and they started doing these family office meetings up in Chicago. So I got introduced early, and what I loved about that was that was very much driven around bringing the family together as your kids grow into adults, sharing values, because we know that we really care about our kids and our grandkids, caring forward our values. And the thing that was not so much present at those meetings was it wasn't really faith driven. It was values driven, but not faith driven. So I was always planning in my mind, if I ever had the opportunity and had a family, I would want to include them in this process. I learned a ton, and I thought it was really cool because it was one way to bring the family together with a different dimension. And so that's what planted the seed in me, and what made me kind of start down that path. Really was my oldest daughter was graduating from college and about to get married, which was, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. I was in my mid 40s. I really started pursuing, how do we as a family perpetuate, kind of our values and reinforce these and kind of do it together.
So what was that first step in just trying to perpetuate those values?
Yeah, the first step was, because again, I had a son-in-law that was not yet my son-in-law, and we were trying to, I knew that would bring a whole different dimension. So the first step was we had a meeting, an offsite kind of meeting, which again was I could tell you all the lessons I learned, and I would like to. One was it was way too business-like, because in my mind I'm thinking, well, heck, I do all these business presentations. I just do this for my family. Of course, I thought it was fun. We did it at a cool place, and we did have some fun. It was a nice meeting, but if looking back on it, it was probably a little too much for where we were. I was a little too zealous.
Give me an example. What do you mean by that? What was it? Too much?
Yeah, too much meaning, and I'll just share some tact. And again, what I would say today after 14 years, I'm glad I did it, because it's really planted a lot of foundational seeds, and our family's great, and we have great connection and great family. But I did learn some lessons. But I learned some lessons in the process. One is, as I was mentioning earlier, I think business principles. I'm a businessman, so I'm thinking, well, if it works in business, it should work in family. I think the principles they work, but the tactics and the techniques of how you do it are very different in family. Like it didn't resonate with me that when I was sending emails to my family, my wife and my kids, that I had to have a different tone and rhythm. And even like my signature line on my email would be like, Duane Donner, CEO, whatever. I wasn't even smart enough to take it off of there, so but thinking back on it, it's like my family was like, Dad's coming at us with all this agenda and all these things. And, and they were receptive. They were very receptive, and they were very gracious. My wife, she's very different. She's very art. So I tried to integrate the way she likes to do things, and we worked very hard to make it fun. But I did have an agenda, because the agenda was pure, but there was an agenda. The agenda was, hey, I want to make sure I leave no room for, guessing on, hey, what the vision is for our family, who we are, where we come from. And so those first meetings, what we did a lot of was really values development or values discovery. What are our values? What are we about? Who are the Donners? A lot of that kind of stuff. And of course, I tried to integrate some business things, and, there was always kind of a thoughtful way I approached it early on. But the main thing I was trying to do is just establish a rhythm of us coming together. I always tried to make it fun and connecting, go to a nice place, pay for everything, have nice meals. If I did anything wrong, I tried to do too much. There was too much.
In those first meetings, did you try to incorporate all the kids at that time?
I incorporated them in certain things, like we all had dinner, we all did the connection time. But no, in certain parts of the meeting, because at the time my youngest daughter was like 7 or 8. So
okay.
we were not. That was the challenge. We had a 10-year gap between my youngest, or my middle daughter and youngest. So we had a big gap. So like in some of these meetings, I wouldn't include her because it didn't make sense. She was a kid.
Right.
But
what about the son-in-laws? Did you include the son-in-laws?
I did include the son-in-laws from the beginning, So I did include them, and that was one of the things too. I have a great father-in-law who's been a huge blessing to me. And he's done so many things. But one of the things you pick up things as you go. And one of the things I remember the family meetings we did with their family, I always felt kind of like I was an outsider. Like I wasn't really I was there, but they didn't really want to hear from me. And I was trying to include my new son-in-law. Hey, kind of, hey, what's mine is yours, and that's the way I kind of think, and it's probably, So anyway, I did try to include him in that, or well, I did include him in the process.
Yeah, I mean, what's the line? Sometimes they say in-laws are like outlaws, and you were trying to avoid that.
Yeah, I didn't. In fact, it was funny. And again, I love my father-in-law. We have a good relationship, but he used to call in-laws outlaws.
Okay. That's not a good idea usually.
So there's probably a little pain from those days.
Now, I remember, so you're going to have to help me on this, but there was part of the conversation where, and I don't know if it was with respect to family values, but you'd gotten all hyped up and you kind of went home and said, guys, I've got it figured out. And your kids didn't react quite as well to that approach because you've got adult kids. So walk us through some of that.
Well, I mean, this is the challenge, and they call this at at J Trench, which, I like the word transition, although in this current age, it's a little scary to say transition, but they call it the journey of transition. Like, we have to understand, and again, going back to when your kids are very young, which I learned this, and again, it seems like common sense, but some people are, I guess, a little slow. When your kids are, kids, you are more of a cop and a caretaker. You're doing things for your kids because you have to protect them. And they don't have good judgment. When they become teenagers, you should shift to more, instead of a cop, you should shift to more of a coach where you're coaching them, you're teaching them how to do things. As they become young adults in college, it's smart to move to more of a consultant role where they're kind of inviting you into those conversations. And I learned that at J Trench, but I never learned how to move, I guess, to a different role. And so one of the things that happened is my kids were, in their young adulthood, first married, they were very receptive. We had a lot of these meetings. And then as they started to have their own families and their husbands started to mature, have their own, they became the men of their homes. You know what I mean? I didn't factor that in. I kept thinking of them as, they're part of our family, if that makes sense. And so what happened, and again, this is something that we've been doing this for 12, 13 years. This happened probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And I will just put in a side note. The side note is, and again, every family is different. My wife and I been married 35 years. I love her. We got to have a good relationship. But my wife is a different animal, and I guess most wives are. And she wasn't always Jihan, although we did do one good thing. Or we've done several good things. One thing is we always would meet with our advisors before we'd have a family meeting because I wanted them as a third party to hear what we were doing and because she got more comfortable when we could bounce things off of them. So they kind of would give us the blessing. Okay, yeah, go, do it. But where I messed up along the way, the mistakes I learned, and I learned from them is, as my kids got older, had their own families, and I was getting more excited about this, I started unintentionally, but nonetheless, kind of, I think we did a session with you, and we did the vision, mission, values, purpose, and all that. We had done the values with them, but we had never really. And so I took that and I was like, man, we're going to frame this and make it great. And basically, like, everybody was supposed to be excited about it. And of course, Amy and I developed it together, which, made me feel like it was ours. And then when I kind of presented that to the family, especially, my adult kids that were married, especially my oldest daughter, she didn't like it. And I found out later, my son-in-law really didn't like it because he felt like I was basically saying, I'm the guy, and y'all come underneath our tree. And we kind of had to have several, not so fun conversations with them around, hey, we appreciate you have values and we share your values, but we have our own set of values and our own set of things. And, basically we don't have a hierarchical family, like where you're calling the shots. And again, all this was done and again, my wife, of course, she, didn't like it because, it turned into kind of a little bit bigger situation than I hoped it would, because it kind of caught me off guard a little bit. I didn't get really mad about it, but I did. It did knock me back. Like because I thought we were on this cool linear path to something great, and I realized I had probably not approached all that in the right proper way.
You were expecting everybody to sign on the dotted line and say,
Yeah,
"Way to go,
exciting.
Dad! I'm in. We're signing up for the Army." And your son-in-laws are like, "No, we got our own deal."
Yeah, and what I was trying to help them see, and again, from my perspective, I mean, everything I've done is very pure. I'm trying to bless them because I'm saying, okay, God's blessing us. There's all these opportunities. I'm like, come alongside us. We got this kingdom, all these kingdom opportunities, and I want y'all to be part of this. I want y'all to be included. And they kind of saw it as like, and again, I never presented it this way from my perspective, but they kind of saw it as, well, if we go do Dad's thing, then you get all the, it's like, it was like almost like a deal. You come get under this and you get to do all the, and that wasn't at all my heart. But, there was just a lot of, it's complicated. As you know, you deal with a lot of families. I mean, it's way more complicated than when you start. And by the way, it's the first time I've ever had a son-in-law, and the first time I ever done this. So I'm doing it the first time. And, I learned some of the things I thought were not necessarily the, ideal.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we say to parents sometimes is that, and we say this to in-laws and kids. We say, "Hey, give your parents a little grace because it's their first time,
Right?
And it'll always be their first time." So we're not always going to get it right. So that's a little bit of word to the wise.
And I just say, as I noted earlier, and it's been very vulnerable. I mean, I think part of the challenge for us was my wife and I weren't on the same page, and we were struggling a little bit, within our marriage during some of those times. And I think that manifested in, insecurities and a lot of things that made it. It's almost like you're fighting an uphill battle. If you're not on the same page with your spouse, then it's very hard to get in front of your kids and do all this. That created another dynamic that really created a lot of dynamics, which is probably when you remember talking to me, probably with tears in my eyes, going, "What in the world?"
Well, you're the hard driving business guy. I got a goal to get done here, so here it is. Everybody sign up, and they weren't signing up.
Right. Now, I think even more than that, it uncovered. The good news is it opened up some conversations and some I think healing process that needed to happen in our family. So we went into a season of, for me, it was pruning, but healing, where we took a step back and we spent some time, working through some of this stuff, which was a good thing, but it wasn't a fun thing necessarily.
Yeah, talk about some of that, because there certainly would be people listening to this journey here that you're on and would say, "Man, I've done that before," particularly with, and of course, this applies to adult kids or even teenage kids where you're like, "Here's the plan, sign up," and then they don't. And then how do you work through that, this disruption that you created?
Yeah, well, very carefully and very slowly. And then one of my challenges, as you alluded to, is I am a hard charger. I like to have a plan, be decisive, go. And again, when it comes to family, you have to be much more gentle, which is one of the fruits of the Spirit I'm continuing to pray for. I'm more gentle than I used to be. But, really just trying to take more time to ask questions, to seek to understand, to make it more about, honestly. And by the way, at this stage, part of the challenge for me too, Bill, is, and again, you can come up with in hindsight, you get 20/20 vision, but I was doing all this, started doing all this in my mid 40s. So, I'm still a pretty hard charging fella. I'm 58 now, so I'm much more mature. And as you mature, and so I think when you get to the stage I am now, it's much easier to slow down and be more, understand that this is not something I'm trying to conquer or accomplish, but this is more something I'm trying to facilitate for my family, not for me, not for what I'm trying to do. And I do think I probably was a little bit on both sides of that before, and now I have more clarity around where we are today. Is like we have a game plan. A lot of this ties into a state and how we're going to do things. Part of what I wanted my kids to understand early on, because we were, in a process of being blessed, is that like we want to, we want to bless you, we want to love you, but it's more about our values and our faith than it is the assets. Because we decided, and my wife came on board early on, that we weren't going to, because of our faith and kind of just what we desire, we weren't going to make it our goal to transfer just as much wealth as we could to our kids. And again, this is if you have wealth beyond what you need to live, then that becomes And so I wanted my kids to know early on, which I don't know if it's the right time or not, that hey, we're going to bless you and we're going to you're going to have an inheritance, but we're not. Our goal is not to just give you a bunch of stuff. You know what I mean? It's really to make this about our values, our faith, but because we're not going to and again we're blessing our kids. They're very blessed, but we're not trying to maximize wealth transfer, and we're trying to maximize kingdom transfer.
Yep. So pause on that for a second, Duane, because how did they react to the idea that, hey, it's not all coming my way and that more of it's going to be given away?
Well, in the room, they seemed to be fine with it. But what I found out later is they weren't as fine with it as I thought they were. Not because they don't share our values, but because it confused them. They're kind of like, well, if you're basically saying, this isn't about you getting stuff, then why are we having these meetings? And, like, what are you just trying to tell? I mean, part of it can be like, what were you trying to tell us about everything? And we weren't going in these meetings showing our balance sheet and all that, but we were definitely saying, here's the plan. Here's what we have. Here's the plan. What I was trying to do is help them, invite them into, one, being aware of what we're doing, because that's part of it at the age appropriate stage. And secondly, invite them into participating. Because again, I'd been over there to meet, David Green and see what he's doing. Of course, he's at a different stage. And it's like he's got his family involved in all this. So it's like, I want y'all to be involved in what we're doing. You know what I mean? But I think it was a little confusing to them. And I tried to go too fast, and I think it wasn't the right time. But the point is, it's very complex.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good word is that idea of just slowing down, going at the speed of relationship, going at the speed of family versus the speed of business. I think you've hit that really well. I want to back up to one thing that you said a moment ago too, which is that you and Amy would meet with your advisors before you would have those meetings. Who were the advisors?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to say one of the best things, I mean, I'm talking a lot about my mistakes, but one of the best things I ever did, and Amy would agree with this, because Amy, my wife, we've done very well. Found her. My wife comes from a wealthy family, so she has her own wealth. And this has always been a little bit of a challenge because, really from her family's perspective, it was kind of like, that's separate. And then, so, that's always been, my wife's always had independence from, us. And so, but she was my wife doesn't like dealing with money or all that kind of stuff. So her approach was generally like, I just don't want to deal with it. And I'm like, no, you have to deal with it. Like, this is our responsibility. And if you don't want me to deal with it, we have to have people that help you deal with it. So I convinced her, and she helped me. I mean, I gave her some ideas, but we went and we hired financial advisors that shared our values. That, and again, values meaning more family. They were faith people, but at the time, my wife wasn't as concerned about that, but it was like, yeah, they share values. We hired this group. There was a male and a female advisor. These are financial advisors, basically wealth management people that, we had met that I knew here, and they were great people. And we hired them, and this is probably 20 years ago. And and I said, hey, we need to meet every month. And we met literally for 10 years every month. We would meet. They would talk through it. And mainly I would just sit there and listen and let them explain to Amy where we are, what we're doing, And then after about 10 years, we were in a place because we couldn't talk about money before that because it was just, it was too
Yeah.
unsafe for her. And then we started making a lot of, doing very well in our business, and we had a lot of extra money. So then we had the opportunity to start basically using them as a sounding board between me and Amy, which for us was something we definitely needed because she and I were just speaking different languages. She didn't even understand a lot of what I was talking about. So having these advisors who she trusted there were very key to what we were trying to, do.
Yeah, and we talk about that idea that sometimes it's just critical to have that third party facilitator that's bringing that conversations that sometimes you can't do by yourself. So that, and of course it's biblical, isn't it? That idea of having the abundance of counsel.
Yeah.
Back to this period though, where there was this disruption and maybe the kids felt a little imposed on.
Yeah.
How'd you get out of that? I mean, get to a better place? Did you have to go meet with everybody individually?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we had these coaches that were helping us in our marriage, and we invited them in when all that happened, and they were able to work with our kids, with us. We had some family meetings. Everybody's a family with them. They're very much relationally driven, faith driven. And then they actually started, we had them have several sessions with our kids without us. And we kind of worked through all that over time to a place then we could, get to a place where everybody was kind of, understanding at least what the intent was. And now what we do, which is again, not what I would prefer, but it's where we are, is, we meet with our family more as family. In other words, we don't all come together in one room as a family to have these meetings, to have these discussions. Yeah. But and with another part of that's, again, I didn't really understand. I understand more now. Is there is a dynamic too between siblings. Like my girls are very close. They love each other. Their husbands like each other. There's no that I'm aware of. There's no disruption or anything going on in our family. But what I realized is that when I have two son-in-laws in a room with their spouses, which are my daughters, there's a certain dynamic between those guys and me that's, going on. And it's because they're at different places. One of them's, started his career later. He's younger. One of them's, come into a family business. He's, I mean, what I'm saying? He's in a different place financially, and it creates all kinds of dynamics that I wasn't clear on. So
yeah, sometimes there's just plain old competition in there.
Yeah, some of that, and some, you don't want to hurt the guys. So there's a lot going on. So my oldest daughter and my son-in-law said, hey, what we'd like to do is, we'd be happy to have meetings with y'all. But yeah, let's just call us up. Let's get together when y'all want to meet. We're happy to talk about whatever y'all want to talk about. And, again, that's not what I had in my vision. And I think we're in a season of where that's, I'm hopeful that eventually we'll move into a different season.
That hope is that you'd all come together in one family meeting.
That would be my hope.
How did that discussion go, by the way, with regard to family values? Just take that subject. Do you guys have one common set of values?
Well, we did. See, that's the thing. It's an evolution, right? Like anything. We've been doing this now for 15 years. So yes, we have, and we have worked on multiple iterations of family values that we have as the Donner family. But then my married daughters who have families now have also developed their values, and their values overlap with our values, but they have some different values. And it's not like they're against it. It's just like, again, I think the son-in-laws are kind of like, hey, this is our family. And I can relate to that now, because if I had my father-in-law saying, hey, here's your values, I'd be like, well, I understand. I appreciate that, but I might want to have my own values.
Right. So you're allowing for some freedom within the forum now with those adult kids.
Yes. I wouldn't even say allowing. I would say making room for, because I don't think, the bottom line is you can't. I mean, we know this, right? I mean, I know this from every aspect of life. You can't, make somebody do something like that. I mean, when they're adults, it's either they, you can encourage them and inspire them and influence them, but you know, you're just kidding yourself if you think you're going to say, "Hey, here's how we're going to do it." So what I'm learning, and I've learned through this process, is really my goal of all this right now is trying to understand where are my adult kids. All my kids are adults. Where are they stage of life are they in? What are their goals and visions and aspirations, their values, which overlay with my values, certainly. And what can we do with the resources we have to come alongside them? And one, first and foremost, you know, help them reinforce those values in their families, perpetuate those values. For instance, we put together a heritage fund because it's like, yeah, we're not going to just. And by the way, my kids they have different things. They're not trust fund babies, but they do have trust from different things that were even before us. But they have a certain age and access. But what we said is like, hey, if you want to, do things like put your kids in Christian schools or take them to JH Ranch or, go take a marriage retreat or anything that really is going to align with our values that we think are important, then of course we never want money. If we have plenty of resources, we would never want money to be the reason you can't do that. So we put a fund in place in the family and said, you can access this fund. I mean, there's some, requirements around it. We let our advisors administrate it because again, I don't want to be administrating it, but we put a requirement and they've been using that to do things.
That's your heritage fund. They can actually
right.
come to the fund, your advisors, and say, man, we've got something that we will will build our family. Will you support that?
Yeah, and I love doing that.
What about in terms of the heritage idea? How much giving have you done as a family?
Well, it's funny because way back when we had the idea, okay, let's put a fund together and bring our kids into it and allow them to give. We did that the first time, and again, they were young and they're learning. And by the way, my kids are Christ followers. They love the Lord and they give in their own right. I mean, they're all givers. But when we first did that, they were young, just getting going. And we did it probably almost 20 years ago. And, at the end of the year, I'm like, okay, well, how much have y'all given? We hadn't given anything. I'm like, well, then I'm like, hey, y'all need to give this money, So then it's like they heard, well, let's, they just giving it to anybody, because it's like, I got to give away this money. I'm like, well, that's not the spirit it is that you just go give away the money without being thoughtful. Then I said, well, let's do this. How about we do a deal where I'll match you? You for every buck you put up, I'll put up $8 or something, So at least you're vested in this. It's not just a freebie. You know what I mean? And so we did that. And then, of course, a couple of them did it. But then I went back a year later, or 2 years later, I get a message from NCF. Hey, got this money sitting here. Nobody's using this money. I'm like, okay. So, it didn't work. At the same time, I'll tell you that both my son-in-laws and their families are very big givers. They're much more mature. I was just trying to prime the pump for them to be generous and to share in the generosity. I've also done things like recently, which was awesome. About 2 years ago, we made a big gift to Highlands College, and I did a bunch of scholarships in my kids' names. And I said, hey, these scholarships that we're giving this money for are in your name, and you can come up with how you want to designate the scholarship. We had a big ceremony and all that, and they've done that and been part of that. But honestly, that's something I really desire for more involvement, and I'm trying to figure it out. You might help me with that. How do I, as we move into these years of our lives where we're going to be, how do we involve our kids gradually? Because it's not like I'm just going to say, hey, I'm giving you carte blanche. You tell us where you want to do this. But I want to bring it in. In fact, one of the things we're doing, Bill, which you're familiar with, I think, and I've learned about this through Ken and the college, we're actually doing a perpetual purpose trust at Founders. We're going to have stock, some of the stock of our firm going into this trust, and it's going to give us the ability to give out of the earnings of our firm, hopefully into perpetuity. That's the goal, and so we're going to have a board. I'm setting up a board, and because I'm alive now, I can still lead it. But the whole idea is that when I'm gone, this continues forward, and I want my family to be part of that board, and you know, obviously people from Founders and maybe a third party, and so I've talked to my daughters about that, and they seem excited about that. Hey, we get to be part of, deciding how to get. Now there'll be an overarching kingdom perspective and thing. There'll be some parameters, but they'll have a say in how to distribute those funds. And I think that's kind of what I think David Green does. Of course, he's 80 years old.
If it's okay, Duane, let me give a little bit of diagnostic here for you because your experience is not unusual. I do find that parents get all excited about, we're going to give some money away and the kids are going to get excited. But when they're 20s, they're just so busy and, whether it's college or new career, the expectation that they're going to go spend their time to go find a new ministry, it's unrealistic. And I just find a lot of those early efforts just go kaput. Right. They just don't go very far. So a lot of what we tend to recommend in those early years is some of the what I call the random generosity exercises. And that's where you actually do it together and you give everybody $100 and you say, let's go do a field trip and we're going to find somebody in need that we can give to.
That's a great idea.
Let them experience, I just saw this guy here and he needed some money, or, you feel the nudge of the Holy Spirit. And I find that's one of the most, that's certainly the thing that we did with our kids that had the biggest impact. But to do it together in those early years is one of the best things. Then when they get older, and this is the transition, you talk about transitions, but like the Green family made is that as the kids got older and they had time and capacity, is then they could have ministries come in and say, all right, here's our presentation. And the family could listen and process it together, consistent with what the family values. Now, this is the part of the point, with regard to those family values, you go out and you look for, so if one of your values is family, well, what are the family ministries that we're supporting? Or if our value is discipleship, is there a discipleship ministry that we're going after? And that kind of engagement we've found is definitely more helpful. But you do got to allow some of that maturity, the time, the capacity, all those things to happen.
Yeah, no, you're right. And, so that's when, again, I'm learning all these things. I love what you're doing because I think having a resource like you that people can go to and, not have to learn the hard way maybe, or at least get a head start,
Well, as you know, part of our goal is to serve families in the local church early. The earlier you can get them, the better, rather than trying to wait until they're in their 30s for sure. I did want to come back to one thing too, Duane, because you mentioned it, because I've used this JH Ranch framework, the idea early years are caretaker, and then you go to cop, and then you go to coach, and then you go to consultant. And that's the one that I think we're trying to change, and I'd like your input on, because the consulting idea tends to say, I'm going to wait and wait till they come to me and say, here's your advice. I really like the term partnership and that we're in this together.
I love that. Yeah. Or collaboration, partnership. Yeah. I love that. You're right. Because it is a part. They need to see, and I'm seeing the power of that today, honestly. Again, it's funny, and I always use these analogies, probably gets me in trouble, but I'm watching this happen with our business. I mean, our business is 23 years old, so it's a young adult. We've got all this next generation of leaders coming up that have been in our culture, and I'm literally in the process of transferring or selling shares to this next generation of leaders. We've been growing up. They're like my kids, but they're adults, and what I'm seeing happen, which is so exciting. And again, we're doing it gradually. It's like turning a knob. It's not a bam. It's not a one-time thing. It's happening over time. Is what I'm seeing is as these young leaders who are very important to our firm are buying into ownership, and we're making that very attractive for them. It's a win-win, but it's very attractive economically. They are stepping up to a whole nother level. They're literally taking ownership because they are truly partners now. Before they were leaders, maybe managing directors, they had authority, but as partners, it's a whole different deal. You see things different. And that's where, to your point, if your kids can see it as a partnership, how do you make it a partnership? And that's honestly, I don't think my kids feel like it's a partnership. They feel like this is dad's thing and he's trying to, and does he have, which is the part that hurts me the most, is like, is he trying to use this to maneuver on us? It's like, why would I do that? I mean, to me, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I want to kind of pull out to Duane, your family vision, mission, values. Can you state that here? Okay, good.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, you were part of that. I mean, this is like everything. They always are evolving, but our vision is to build a godly family heritage for 10 generations. So the vision is we want to have a godly heritage for 10 generations. And, I don't know why 10, but that's where we landed. That's a long time. And then the way we do that.
If you get to 10, you're more likely to be able to keep going after that. So,
yeah. And the way we do that, the mission, the way we live out is abiding daily. So it's staying connected to the vine. It's serving others, and it's living generously. So we believe as a family that if we stay connected to the vine, that we're about serving other people, we're about others, and we live generously. We're givers. That will lead to a godly heritage for 10 generations.
Yeah,
and then
that's good.
The values that we've landed on within that are one, God first. I mean, God has to be the priority in our lives. And by the way, my kids and my son-in-laws, I think they live that out. God first. Of course, family is a value of ours. Family / heritage, because we love our family. We want to spend time with family. Perseverance. We've been through a lot, and perseverance is a value that we believe in. You got to stick through the hard times and persevere and go through that. And of course, generosity is a big one. We want to live generously in our families, and then serving is another one. We believe in serving. Of course, that's tied into our mission. But those are the things that we really live around, and kind of the major tenets.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, we're getting ready to turn home here and get this wrapped up. And so I'm going to give you the chance to give any last words here of advice that you'd have for families at any stage, whether they're just young families trying to make this work, or families like yours that are like a little bit like, we got toothpaste to put back in the tube. Right. Anything you'd like to say?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I would like to say that, to me, with the right heart, which is a heart towards the Lord, family is, like you talk about, is the essence of this, what God set in motion here, and you cannot, in my opinion, and based on my experience, you can't ever go wrong bringing family together and having communication, especially if you're inviting God into that. Because it's going to be hard. It's not easy, but it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth the investment. It's never too early. You don't have to have adult kids. You can start this early. In fact, to your point, the earlier you start, the better, because you get in a rhythm of communication. And the other thing I'd say, and again, I know this is hard for people who don't have a lot of resources, although you are a resource. And I mean, this is not a commercial. This is the truth. No matter how good you are, how much you want to do it, how smart you are, you need people to help you. You need resources and other people to come alongside you to help you, because we can't do it alone. We need other people to help us. And
Yeah,
that's why I
that's
love what you're
good.
doing.
Yeah. And that's the ministry, certainly, of what we have, Legacy Stone. Let me wrap up with this one last thing, because you've got a new ministry effort as well. So I
Yeah.
wanted you to just take a minute to reference Abide and Lead.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. Abide and Lead. The vision for Abide and Lead is to cultivate a community. Mainly, we're focused on business owners and leaders. That's who we minister to, who first and foremost want to be connected to the vine, who abide in Christ, and they lead. This is about leading, abide in Christ and lead for eternal impact. And really, the way we're doing that, Bill, the main thing is we're really trying to help leaders learn how to be integrated in their lives, live integrated lives, meaning your faith. If you're a follower of Jesus, you should bring that into every aspect of your life, your business, your family, your ministry, everything. It shouldn't be like I'm one way at work and I'm another way at home. And I think that's a big deal. And I think it starts with just, really emphasizing the abiding. John 15:5 is my life verse. I think it's the most important thing. Jesus said, if you abide in me, he said, I'm the vine, you're the branches. If you abide in me, I'll abide in you, and you will bear much fruit. And apart from me, you can do nothing. And so I just believe if we make that a priority, God will bless it. Even, and by the way, he did also say you're going to be pruned and you're going to go through tough times. It doesn't mean it's going to be all easy, but the fruit. And by the way, there is fruit. There is fruit in my family, in my life, in our business. And it's not something I did. It's what God's done through the process.
Yeah. That's a really good way to wrap up. So, Duane Donner, thanks so much for being here on the podcast, Family Frameworks, and we'll close this out.
Yes, thank you, Bill. Appreciate you, brother.